Coming off of Wrestlemania 42, we see arguably the two premier superstars in pro wrestling today holding the two biggest prizes in the sport. Roman Reigns as the World Heavyweight Champion and Cody Rhodes as the undisputed WWE Champion. It got me thinking about Wrestlemania 40 just over 2 years ago and how they represent two of the most successful cases of character progression in pro wrestling, yes, but storytelling is a medium entirely. Characters do not necessarily fail because the performer lacks talent. They fail because the story has not found the truth yet. Roman Reigns was always powerful. Cody Rhodes was always gifted, both had the look, the skill, the presence, and the potential to be major stars, but potential is not the same thing as identity. For years, both men had pieces of greatness. Roman had aura without the right emotional framing, and Cody had creativity without the final mission. Then came the Tribal Chief. Then came the American Nightmare. And suddenly, everything clicked. The interesting thing about Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes is that their earlier characters were not all bad. That would be too simple. You could see the glimpses of brilliance, the diamond in the haystack, the potential, but something was clearly missing for both of them. Roman was not some failed experiment with nothing to offer. He had presence, he had strength, he had the cool gear with the vest and the boots. He looked like someone who belonged near the top of the company. Cody was not untalented either. He had polish, range, charisma, and a willingness to try almost everything and anything. From legacy kid to dashing Cody Rhodes to undashing, masked Cody Rhodes to Stardust, you could see the creativity, but something was missing. Roman's early issue was that the role did not match the reaction. He was being presented as the heroic, chosen one, while a large part of the audience saw him as the company's chosen successor, not the people's. Cody's early issue was different. He had characters, but not yet a destiny. He had personality, but not yet a myth. Both men had ingredients. What they needed was identity. That is why the Tribal Chief worked. It did not erase what people already thought about Roman. It weaponized it. Fans already saw Roman as powerful. They already saw him as protected. They already knew he came from wrestling royalty. They already felt like WWE wanted them to acknowledge him. So the character made that the point. Roman stopped being the hero fans were told to cheer for and became the ruler who demanded recognition. That is the genius of the Tribal Chief. It turned the tension into the character. The head of the table was not just a nickname. It gave Roman a worldview. Family was not just his background, it became the battleground. Respect was not just applause, it became control. And acknowledgement was not just a catchphrase, it became the emotional engine of the character we know as the Tribal Chief today. Roman Reigns finally felt complete because the character explained him, gave shape to the power, the silence, the arrogance, the insecurity, and the pressure of a legacy of one of the greatest wrestling families there is. He was not simply strong anymore. He was a king trying to convince the world, and maybe himself, that the kingdom cannot survive without him. Cody Rhodes' reinvention worked in the opposite direction. Roman's character absorbed resentment and turned it into control. Cody's character absorbed rejection and turned it into purpose. This is what makes the American Nightmare such a great character. It is built on contradiction. He is the son of the American dream, but his path was not dreamlike. It was exile, reinvention, frustration, ambition, and ultimately the need to prove that he was not just living inside someone else's legacy. Earlier versions of Cody showed talent. The American Nightmare gave that talent a destination. Suddenly, the suits mattered, the entrance mattered, the emotion mattered, the references to Dusty mattered, the losses mattered. And ultimately, we can say the comeback is what matters most. Because now, everything was pointing toward one idea: finish the story. That phrase worked because it was simple, but it carried years of meaning for anyone who followed his story, from when he was first in WWE, to his time on the independent circuit, to his time in Japan, Mexico, and then later on, AEW. It was not just about winning a title. It was about completing something unfinished. It was about taking the dream he inherited and turning it into something he earned. And there is something powerful about that kind of story. Because sometimes a person meets their destiny on the very road they took to avoid it. Cody had to leave the place where the dream felt impossible, only to become the person who could return and finish it. That is not just a wrestling storyline. That is myth. And that is why Roman and Cody became perfect opposites. Roman was the king who already had the table, but still needed everyone to acknowledge him. Cody was the prince without the crown, trying to make the inheritance mean something. One character was about control, the other was about completion. One demanded recognition, the other chased resolution. Roman's story asked, how long can a ruler hold on to power when his empire is built on fear, loyalty, and manipulation? Cody's story asked, can a man step out of a shadow, survive rejection, and become worthy of the dream he carries? That is why their conflict felt bigger than a normal title chase. It was not just champion versus challenger. It was control versus destiny. It was the man who demanded acknowledgement against the man who needed to finish the story. You see the same principle outside wrestling too. Reed Richards becoming the Maker works because it does not feel random. It feels like a familiar character pushed into a darker shape. The intelligence was always there. The ambition was always there. The need to solve everything was always there. The reinvention simply asks, what happens when those traits lose their heroic filter? That is the rule of great character reinvention. The best new versions do not come from nowhere. They reveal something that was already there. That is the difference between a gimmick and an identity. A gimmick gives someone a look. An identity gives them a reason to exist. Roman Reigns did not become iconic just because he wore the Ulafala and stood beside Paul Heyman and called himself the tribal chief. Cody Rhodes did not become iconic just because he wore a suit, dyed his hair, and called himself the American Nightmare. Those things mattered because they became symbols of something deeper. Roman became the man who demanded acknowledgement. Cody became the man chasing completion of his story. And once those identities were clear, the audience knew exactly what they were watching. Not just two wrestlers with new presentations. Two characters who finally made sense. That is the real power of character work. Not just in WWE, but in storytelling itself. A great character is not created by adding random details. A great character is revealed when every detail points to the same truth. And when that happens, the gimmick disappears. What is left is identity.